Hello there. I've been asked a series of highly intelligent questions by someone who's going through their shamanic training online, and I thought this is a golden opportunity to go into it in even more detail than I've done before. One of the cornerstones of shamanic practice is called soul retrieval. Ask any practicing shaman about soul retrieval, and if they know this stuff, they're going to be able to come up with good answers for you. So let's just go first of all into what it is. So my direct example that comes up for myself is I was in a head-on collision and I was unconscious, and eventually the ambulance came to pick me up, and a while later, after having zoned out again, I woke up in hospital and I'd been given morphine for the pain. And as soon as I was awake, I realised what I needed to do was to do a soul retrieval, because I'd had a head-on collision, which means that there's a fragment of my energy, which we call a soul part, would have literally been knocked out of my body through the impact, and it would be left by the side of the road in the place where I had the accident. So then and there, in hospital under morphine, I did myself a soul retrieval for myself. At that point, I had a huge amount of experience at doing soul retrievals, so this was something it was okay to do for myself, despite being under morphine. Although when I was able to move around again and get to the right part of the country, I did go and see my teacher and have one done as well, to be absolutely sure. So what happens when a person has soul retrieval is that the shaman gets their permission, absolutely essential, and there's a journey for that person. And if I was journeying for someone called John, I would say, as a shaman, I journey for John, I journey for John, I journey for John. And there would be some indication why soul retrieval would be appropriate. So what are the indications? Well, I've given away the most obvious one. Any extreme shock or trauma will cause this to happen. And my experience of human beings on planet Earth is that pretty much everyone experiences trauma, has experienced trauma at some point in their lives. So it's a really significant and essential ground-based work to do for someone. One of the signs and symptoms of a person requiring soul retrieval is a complete loss of motivation in their life, not knowing really why they're alive and going through the motions, maybe being a little bit zombified, just not really connected anymore. And the time in 2020, with the extreme isolation and the other mandates that people throughout the world were forced to comply with, put a lot of people into a state of traumatization. And so since then, soul retrieval has been even more necessary than it was before. A lot of people walking around not really fully embodied because some part of themselves got left behind in that long drawn out isolation based trauma. Depression is another really good sign and symptom for someone requiring this work. So let's go into what the shaman does. So what the shaman does is, having obtained their client's permission, they get their drum out or whatever trance induction method they're going to use, and using the drum or tapping the thumb to the index finger, or making use of a drumming track, or doing breathing practice, they get themselves into an altered state of consciousness, and they connect with their guides and their helpers, and they do this in their safe place, which is a place they go to specifically for doing healing work. And usually, once the journey has been launched, which is through their intention, 3 times I journey to my safe place to meet my guides, to journey for whoever it is, well, all that simply gets simplified. I journey for John in the case I'm giving you. So what I'm going to describe is the one I did for my mother, actually. That's the one that's coming up. So I'm journeying from my mum, and she's in the room with me, lying down, and I'm sitting up drumming. And suddenly I'm in what looks like a Victorian schoolroom. It's what I would picture a schoolroom to look like in the Victorian time. And she's in the corner, and the teacher has basically indicated that she's a load of rubbish and that she has no value whatsoever, which is why she's in the corner of the classroom, because she failed to come up with an answer to the question that's being asked. Very common situation, happened to many people. Another example, when you're a young child, of how easy it is to become traumatized. So that's what I found. I found my mother in the corner in a state of utter despair. And so what I did, I arrived with my guides and my helpers, and what we do, because I need to explain, shamanism is definitive proof of ability that human beings have to travel through space and time. Because that's what I've just done. I've just travelled through space. I'm not in Devon, I'm in Yorkshire. And I'm not in the year I was when I was doing this work for my mum, which would have been about 2009, when I'd have done that work for her. Actually, I went back to the 1930s. So I've travelled through space and time, and I am seeing my mother as a child, age approximately 6, and that information was given to me. So some of the shamanic work is done through actually seeing what's going on, and other aspects it's the information is given to me. So I didn't ask her how old she was, I simply was given the data. 6 years old, and I can see that she's in a state of extreme distress. So the first thing we do is we approach the lost soul part with kindness and gentleness. And if we can see instantly that on the spot healing is required, then either I or the guides go into healing mode and do exactly what is required to do to help them in the state that they're in, which is a state of what I call extreme distress. So once that is done, then I speak to my mother, who's age 6, and I tell her about her in 2009, and I tell her about what an amazing life she's having and what an extraordinary journey she's been on, and I ask her, would she like to come with? And what usually happens is an overwhelming yes. And so what happened is my guide Golden Eagle became giant size, opened up her wings, and my mother's soul part jumped onto Eagle's back, and we all jumped onto Eagle's back with her, and we flew back from 1935 through to 2009. And when we arrived, because I'm doing this the traditional way, what happens is I'm aware that she's back. I'm aware that she's waiting to be reunited with her present day self. And so what I do, the old traditional way of doing this, which I haven't done for a very long time, the only time I ever do this is in exceptional circumstances when I'm training people. So what I did is I hobbled over on my hands and knees. I put my hands in this position. I did a big, deep inhalation like this. Exhale first. Inhale. And I blew the recovered soul part into a heart center. Different shamans blow the soul parts into different parts of the body. With me is always the heart center, because my work is all about love. So that's soul retrieval. That is it. However, in my practice, after I'd done my training and I was staying with one of my shaman friends, we had a conversation about shamanic practice, and my friend said to me, "You do know you can do this remotely, don't you?" Well, this was a big shock to me. So I'm just going to get out the message I received this morning with the questions, because I'm pretty sure we're touching on a question now. So let me just find out where it is. Right, let's look at this list. So the first question is a really good one. Do we have to be online together at the same time for the soul retrieval process, or at my own time? Well, the answer to that is that because we are multidimensional space-time travellers, we are not constrained by any of the limitations which are imposed upon human beings in a normal situation. The second question is, do I have your permission? The answer, of course, is a resounding yes. I'm training him and I'm offering myself to be the person that he's going to do his very first soul retrieval on. So second question, get the permission, give the answer, in this case yes, resoundingly. So when it comes to the first question, let's look at that. There was quite a bit to it, wasn't it? Do we have to be online here together at the same time? Answer, no we don't, because we are transcending the normal limitations of space-time, or at my own time. Not exactly sure what that means, but basically it means that he's doing this work in his own time. That's it. Let's look at the next question down. In the film, it seems as I go to the lower world for the soul retrieval. Let's look at that. Generally speaking, shamanic cosmology, upper, middle and lower world. Generally speaking, we go to the lower world for healing work, but not always. Generally speaking, we go to the upper world for information. So we can't be sure about where we're going to go until we get there. But generally speaking, in the case of my mother, I felt myself travelling down once I declared my intention, and I was using my active imagination travelling, and I was in the theta brain rhythm provided by the drum beat. That's what happened. I felt myself going down, 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 and finally I emerged in this Victorian schoolroom in her particular case. So that's the way it works. But I might not have done, I might have been taken up, and I have a very small number of experience of doing the soul retrieval. That's actually what happened to me. I did indeed go up. Right, so there we are. So generally go down, yep. Do I have to mention to the helping spirit when I arrive that I'm doing a soul retrieval for the client? Well, because I've already declared my intention 3 times. I journey for John, I journey for John, I journey for John. In the example I gave, that means it's all linked in. So having done that, that means that my guides know that that's what's going on, because I've actually declared my intention. I declared it for the client, I declared it for myself, and I declared it for all those beings that are helping me. So that's the answer to that question. Right, what's the next one? It's all been done. Through the statement, it's all been done. Right. Does the lost soul part have any kind of feeling or marker that indicates that this is the lost soul part? It's a pretty good question, isn't it? Shamanism is purely intentionally based. So because I declared my intention that I'm journeying for that particular client, in my example, whose name was John, in the case of my mother, it was journeying for my mother, then wherever I end up, that is where I need to be, because it's all linked in to the power of the intention. So when I see this girl, approximate age 6, in the corner, I know it's her, and I know it's her because the whole thing has been set up through the intention, through the transinduction of the drum beat, through the active imagination. It's all linked in together. So it is emphatically and indubitably my mother in that particular case. Question 5. Do I say anything specific to the lost soul part to bring it back? Such an important question. So when I arrive, if the soul part requires on-the-spot healing, and that is obvious, that's what I do. And then when on-the-spot healing has been done, which is usually done by the guides, sometimes done by me, but usually by the guides, I'm usually just watching, then when I get the sense that the part is ready, then what I do is I ask the soul part a question. And the preamble is to let the soul part know that the person is ready for you to be returned, and a tiny bit of information about the person's life you can throw in there if that's what you're guided to do. The whole thing is you're guided every step of the way, right? So the specific thing that I say is I offer that soul part an invitation to return with us, to be reunited with the whole self. That's actually what I'm doing. And I have great pleasure in telling you I've been doing this work since 2005. And in all that time, there are only actually 2 cases where the soul part said no. And I realized as soon as the soul part had said no, and in one of the cases the soul part gave reasons, it was so obvious. It was because the way the person was living their life was such that the soul part was having none of it. If I come across a client who's living their life which is really not in their best interests, and remember, it's only ever happened twice this, the soul part simply says no. And what I then needed to do is to accept the answer. That client was not ready to receive the soul part because they actually were not respecting themselves enough to be in a position to receive it. So the likelihood of that happening for a shaman is very, very rare. And I'm the only shaman I've ever actually known that's had that happen to them. That's how rare that is. But yes, it's important to be aware that may happen. Do I need to do any healing in the lower world for that soul part, and how do I do that? Already been answered. I would have the sense that the soul part needed on-the-spot healing, and I would either watch as the guides stepped up and did the work, or I would be given something to do specifically. So one of my guides lays cloud dew on the client, which is on the soul part, the client soul part, which is one of the most soothing and restorative things that can happen. I've witnessed that many, many times, hundreds of times, maybe 1,000 or more now. So one particular guide lays on the cloud dew. The golden eagle I've spoken about previously, she shakes her feathers and gold flakes fall out of her feathers, and the gold flakes attach to any toxicity in the soul part's envelope and is taken away. Those are just a couple of mine. In the moment, the guides and you know what to do. It's all about trusting the process of being a shamanic practitioner. You will know what to do because that's the way it works. What else have we got here? Yes. So it may happen. I would say the majority of times on-the-spot healing is not required. Sometimes it is, but it's a significant minority of times. How would I integrate the lost soul part into you since you're not in my physical environment? Now, this is such an important question. So when my shamanic colleague my shaman friend suggested, do remote work. Okay, so what actually happened is she got in contact with someone who'd asked for a soul retrieval, and it was arranged that rather than her doing the soul retrieval, I would do it. So there I am I'm in southeast Spain, the client's in Kansas. I do the work the way it's normally done, and when it comes to blowing the soul part into the heart, I'm literally not in the room with her, so I simply imagine it. The whole thing is done, as the whole thing has been done anyway, in my active imagination. I then sit down and laboriously write out the report, send it to the client by email with whatever message it was that I was given to give, because often we get messages to give the client. And then you can imagine what it's like. I'm staying with my friend in Southeast Spain. It's done. Now what? Get on with your life, because obviously it's going to take time for the person. They're on a completely different time zone from what I'm on. They're maybe 10 hours behind, something like that, because they're to the west of where I am in Southeast Spain. And indeed, a few days go by. You can imagine what that's like. First time, a few days go by. And then I get an email response. And oh my goodness me, the email response is the total, complete and utter validation of the entire process, because she's delighted by how she's feeling now. It's made a huge difference to her in her life, because when you get a soul part that's returned to you, you get a whole bunch of energy that you have been lacking. And it might be for months, years, decades, many decades, or it might even come from another lifetime. That's the important thing to realize. When soul retrievals are concerned, you could actually be tapping into a trauma or traumas from a different lifetime. This is how profound, deep, powerful and significant this work is. So she was, to use the English colloquialism, over the moon. And my friend and I turned around and looked at each other and said, yes. So how is this possible? Well, it's the same as it's the answer to how is it possible to travel through space and time, maybe even through lifetimes, because I've done so many through lifetimes, you can't imagine. So it's because we have left behind the limitations of the 3D reality. As soon as a person becomes a shamanic practitioner, bye-bye 3D, and they do the bye-bye bit when they either lie down and listen to the drumming track or sit up and are doing the drumming, whichever it is. That is when they let that part go, because their spirit journeys to the safe place and meets their guides and declares the intention, and with the active imagination ends up in that location where the lost soul part or soul parts are. And of course, eventually with the universal soul retrieval, I was retrieving thousands of soul parts in one session. But that's a story for another time, and you can look in my back catalogue because it's all there. Shamanism, universal soul retrieval. But we're talking about the straightforward traditional method. So what evidence or supporting corroboratory data do we have about this? Well, when my friend suggested I do this healing work, when I did it, and when I got the result back, I felt like, duh, spiritual healers have been doing something called absent healing or distant healing for forever, just the same as shamans have been doing this sort of thing. That was a huge shock to realize, goodness me, when I was in my early 30s, I was a regular attender at a spiritual church, and that's what they did. They do spiritual healing for people. So traditionally, shamans, spiritual healers, you would simply make an arrangement. You have to have a way to make sure that you got that permission. In the old days, it might have been a letter, a phone call, who knows what it would have been. Carrier pigeon, whatever. So let's just have a look. Is there anything else that I've been asked that I haven't answered? So it's about how do we integrate the lost soul part since we're not into the physical environment. Well, the way we did that is the way that we do it always, which is that we are no longer constrained and limited by our physical bodies. So the traditional way that I was taught was to blow it in forcefully, but I very quickly abandoned that method and simply went into for me, I'm quite a visual person. I'm a very visual person actually. So what I did, especially when I was doing a whole load of soul parts at once, I would see the soul part or parts forming into a giant teardrop which was inverted, and the point of the teardrop would be positioned just above the client's heart. So basically the soul part or parts have been retrieved, come back with us, and we arrive, and in this case the client is in Canada, so when I talk about, so I'm visualizing the client's energy body in my healing room, my healing space, and inverted teardrop, and it's like 3, 2, 1, boop, and then all of the lost soul energy from that soul part or parts pours through the teardrop into the person's heart center, and I see the energy spreading throughout their energy body. So it's all done with my active imagination, which may be a visualization. In my case, it often is. For other people for whom the visual sense is not the dominating sense, it's a sense of knowing or feeling. And in fact, with me, it's also feeling. I don't just see it, I feel it. And it's very kinesthetic as well, because I get such a visceral sense of relief whenever I am completing a shamanic work, whether it's distance work or someone working with me in the same room. To be honest, for me, it's a full multi-sensory experience. It involves all the senses, and that comes with practice, that comes with time. At first, there's usually one or maybe two senses which are strongest. So in my case, first of all, I was visual and kinesthetic, a sense of feeling and seeing, but then with practice, it's an overall multi-sensory experience that is so gratifying. And it's good and important for you to know that every single time a shaman does healing work, there's a sense of gratification. So the soul part has been integrated through me seeing, feeling, sensing the soul part returning. And that was the last question. So yes, it's the same as shamans have been doing the world over for millennia. And it's the same as the spiritual healers have been doing. Spiritual healing became a popular thing in the 19th century in Britain and became a worldwide phenomenon too. So that is it. So if you are a shaman in training and you're not contemplating, you've made a choice. You've sought permission from the client. You've got the permission. Yes, I give you my permission for this healing work. Then get on and do the work. And when it's done, if they're not in the same room as you, you will indeed be sending them a written report. And there may well be images that you might search for on the internet, which you would add to your report to give the person an even more profound sense of that healing work. That's what you do. So I'm very, very grateful to my apprentice who's doing his online training for that question. And I'm very grateful for just reminding myself of what a joy it is to be a shamanic practitioner. It's so cool to know that every time I do my shamanic work, I'm a multidimensional space-time traveller. And there are times I've been taken way outside of this planet to do the work, and way outside of this universe, and into a completely other realm. And that, as they say, is definitely for another time. So all the love to all of you. Thank you very much.